Shalom. I'm standing today in front of a Torah scroll that was rescued from the Pinkas Synagogue in the Czech Republic. It was once read from and learned from amidst a community that was dedicated to the ideals of truth and justice and liberty, and that righteousness can be brought forward by all people regardless of race or religion or nationality. But when racism and xenophobia set in during the Second World War, during the Holocaust, this community was decimated. Members of the community were taken to concentration camps and death camps and were murdered, perhaps in empty fields. Some survived to lay roots in new lands, lands that they prayed would turn from hatred, lands such as this one. This Torah is a surviving remnant, a reminder of what can be lost when senseless hatred can become the order of the day. When I first assumed the position of senior rabbi here at Congregation Shalom, I looked back at some of the sermons of our founding rabbi, Rabbi Harry Pastor, and I was struck when I read a sermon he delivered on November 15th, 1963, entitled, "We Pay for Our Prejudice." With the exception of language that was common during its time, it could have been written today. He wrote, "What is our attitude going to be, and what are we going to do? Are white people going to continue to pay the high price for our prejudice, or are we going to be willing to work for change in our own attitudes and improvements in the whole situation?" Rabbi Pastor continued to say, "What do I mean when I refer to the price we pay for prejudice? Well, Booker T. Washington, one of the greatest of African Americans, said, 'You can't hold a man down in the gutter unless you stay down with him.' And we can't keep the black community living in squalid ghettos, and we cannot keep them deprived of equal educational and employment opportunities. And we can't keep them the victims of social discrimination without lowering the spiritual and moral and physical and economic level of our whole community. If we do nothing to help our black brothers and sisters, if we wash our hands of their problems, which are our problems, we will pay the price in our community of increasing crime and illiteracy and disease, and we will be affected by those things as well as they. And above all, we will pay the price in loss of human resources in our community, in the loss of all the tremendous talents and contributions that they will be able to make if we were to only help them have a fair and equitable existence." Rabbi Pastor's sermon was prophetic in every sense of the word. We pay for our prejudice. We do. For now, we may find ourselves still in the battle for civil rights. And though the laws have changed, the system that we live in and benefit from is still prejudicial. It is still stacked against our neighbors. Rabbi Pastor wrote this sermon over 56 years ago. That's 16 years longer than our ancestors wandered in the wilderness on their journey to the Promised Land. Our ancestors, after being freed from slavery, met many people and peoples along the path to the fulfillment of our promise. There were those who blessed us on our way, and there were those who cursed us on our way. There were those and some who placed barriers between us and our freedom, and there were those who were trusted advisors and friends. And now we have the privilege of marching again from the shackles of slavery to the fulfillment of a promise. It is important for us to ask ourselves, who will we be on this journey? For over 2,000 years, the Jewish people, throughout our exile, rise and face east towards the Promised Land, towards Jerusalem. We do so not to merely indicate a directional attitude to a place on a map, signifying a comfort zone. If that were all we were doing, it would be clear that we would be turning our back on tackling the problems in the here and now. Rather, we stand facing east as a reflection of the centrality of the lessons and values learned in that place. For those values never allowed us to feel comfortable. Those values charged us, as Isaiah did, speaking the words of God, "Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, relieve the oppressed." I want to make it clear that there isn't just a racial bias in policing. There's a racial bias in our hearts. We all have prejudices. If we search our hearts, you'll find them. They may have manifested upon seeing some teenagers roughhousing in a mall, and we may have grabbed our purse a little tighter or checked again to make sure the car was locked when seeing someone of a different color on the street. Or we may have said nothing as a store clerk followed an African American around the store to make sure they wouldn't steal. Did we speak up, or did our silence speak for us? We must acknowledge our errors, those that are unintentional and those that are intentional. The Jewish people have experienced severe wounds throughout our history, and it is incumbent upon us to help those who experience pain like ours. We are particularly obligated because for the majority of Jews in this country, we have been given the means to pass. We've been given the means to benefit from white privilege. I know that's hard to hear and hard to accept, and I struggle with it too. After all, we have historically experienced so much pain, but America has afforded us the ability to pull ourselves up. This nation has not done so with our neighbors. There's a beautiful story from the Talmud that illustrates this point. It came to me by way of Rabbi Samuel Karpf. When Rabbi Yochanan was aiding Rabbi Hanina and he came to visit him, Hanina asked, "Are your sufferings so dear to you? Do you believe they will lead to some reward?" And Yochanan replied, "Neither they nor their reward." Whereupon Hanina took Yochanan's hand and healed him. At a later date, Yochanan switched roles. He was now the one that visited an ailing colleague and offered the hand of healing comfort. The Talmud then asks the question, in each case, why didn't the ailing rabbi heal themselves? And the answer is profound. A prisoner cannot free oneself from the prison. When we are ailing in body or spirit, we aren't helped by telling our trouble to ourselves. We may be helped by telling our troubles to a caring, responsive other, if the other is willing to hear. Are we willing to hear? We should be. Our neighbors are suffering. We dare not look away. For we have been sufferers too. We are wounded people. The fractures of pogroms and the Holocaust and the fractures of anti-Semitism that persist should crack our hard exteriors. It should be that we have broken hearts. Those wounds, those fractures, those cracks are sacred. For it was Leonard Cohen who sang to us that there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. May the cracks serve the divine purpose of allowing light to enter our hearts. May we march together to the land of promise, and may, sooner than 56 years from now, speeches like these be relics of the past for the world that we are creating. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.